The first contact was supposed to be a moment of joy and peace, but it did not feel like that when the galactic scout ship descended through the clouds of the lost. Human colony. For 300 years this place had been cut off, and everyone in the galaxy believed the colony was weak and forgotten. The scouts expected to find poor survivors dressed in rags, begging for food or technology. But when the landing platform extended, they saw something else. Then the humans stood waiting in. Silence, their eyes sharp, their faces calm, their movements too measured. Not a single smile appeared. It was not the warm reunion the scouts had imagined. It was cold, almost chilling, as if the humans had been expecting them, but not welcoming them. The scouts stepped out and introduced themselves, their voices polite. But the humans gave short answers and watched closely. Even the children in the background did not laugh or play. They stood still, observing with the same watchful eyes. The lead scout, a tall, insectoid being, felt unease crawl through his body. He had seen survivors on many worlds before, but never like this. These humans were healthy, strong, and organized. Their clothes were plain but well made. Their bodies carried no sign of weakness, and the settlement around them looked clean and efficient. Yet something felt wrong, something hidden behind the stillness of their faces. The scouts tried to ask questions about life on the colony, but the humans gave only short answers, as if measuring every word. The scout team felt the pressure of those silent eyes pressing on them. It was not fear they saw, but something else, something harder. As the sun began to set, the scouts were led to small guest quarters on the edge of the settlement. The buildings were sturdy, their walls reinforced with strange alloys. The scouts did not recognize. At night, the settlement grew quiet, too quiet for comfort. Then a sound reached the scouts through the still air, a steady rhythm in the distance. It was like the pounding of boots on hard ground, like the sound of soldiers. Training. The scouts exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered that it must be construction, but the others were not so sure. The sound carried discipline, not random noise. It was marching, practiced and precise, the kind that only comes from long hours of training. Curiosity pushed one of the scouts to look out the narrow window of their quarters. The night was dark, but he could see shadows moving in lines, groups shifting together, then breaking apart, then joining again. They moved with patterns that looked like drills. Pressed his body against the glass, trying to see more, but a sudden voice came from the darkness behind him. It was a human guard standing outside, watching him closely. The guard said nothing, only lifted a hand in a slow warning gesture and then melted back into the shadows. The scout stepped away from the window, his chest tight with fear. Something was happening here, something far different than what the Galactic Council had imagined. Morning came, and the sounds of the night were gone. When the scouts asked about it during breakfast, the humans only smiled faintly and said it must have been their imagination. But the scouts knew what they had heard. They tried to send a small report back to their ship in orbit, but the signal was strangely weak. Static filled the channel, and the message would not go through. They tried again and again, but failed. Each time it felt as if the signals were being blocked, controlled by someone else. The team leader grew restless. He told his crew to stay cautious, to observe but not to act. Still, unease grew heavier with every passing hour. Later that day, scouts walked through the colony with their human guides. They noticed details they had missed at first. The fields were wide and fertile, but the farmers carried themselves. With the posture of soldiers, children ran along the path, but when they thought no one was looking, they traced shapes in the dirt with their hands, shapes that looked like rifles and blades. One little boy picked up a stick and held it, like a weapon, his stance sharp and practiced. When he noticed the alien watching, he quickly dropped it and smiled as if nothing had happened. The scout's stomach twisted.
Ow.
This was not a colony of helpless survivors. This was a colony that was preparing for something far greater. At night, the scouts gathered in their quarters again, speaking in low whispers. One wanted to leave at once. Another argued they should stay and learn more. The leader reminded them that their ship was still waiting in orbit, but he admitted that something was wrong with their communications. They were not just visitors. Here they were being watched, controlled, and maybe even trapped. The memory of the marching sounds returned, echoing in their heads, a rhythm that refused to fade. The leader could almost feel the vibration of boots pounding in his chest. He knew then that this colony was hiding a truth so dangerous that even the silence felt like a weapon. As he lay awake in the darkness, listening to the faint wind outside, he wondered why the humans had greeted them so coldly. Wondered if it was because of the long abandonment, 3 centuries of being forgotten by the galaxy. Or maybe it was something more, something far worse. He turned his eyes to the ceiling and tried to convince himself that he was only imagining things. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans were not just survivors. They were preparing for war. The second night on the colony was darker than the first. The scouts lay in their quarters, pretending to sleep, but each of them felt the same unease. The silence outside was too heavy, as if the whole settlement was holding its breath. Then, just before midnight, the sound returned. Steady thump, a rhythm moving like a hidden heartbeat under the soil. One of the younger scouts could not take it anymore. He whispered that he would follow the sound. The leader warned him to stay, but the young one slipped out anyway, moving through the shadows, careful not to be seen. He followed the faint glow, beyond the main settlement, across the fields, until he reached a ridge. When he looked down, his blood ran cold. Below him stretched a wide valley, hidden from the landing site, a place no one had mentioned. It was filled with structures of metal and steel. Towers rose like sharp teeth, and lines of humans marched in formation between them. Some carried heavy packs, others practiced with weapons that glowed faintly in the dark. Sparks flashed from the far end of the valley where machines tested guns on armored plates. The sound that had haunted the scouts was clear now, was the rhythm of hundreds of boots drilling in perfect order. This was no farming colony. This was a training ground. The scout pressed himself into the dirt trying to hide, but his eyes could not look away. He saw children, no older than 10, lifting small rifles, their tiny arms steady as stone. Instructors corrected their stances with strict voices, and the children obeyed without hesitation. The valley was alive with discipline, like a hidden army shaping itself in secret. The scout trembled. How had the council not seen this? Had the galaxy allowed humans to grow like this in silence? He pulled out his communicator to send a message back to the ship in orbit, but when he tried, the screen filled with static. The signal was dead, cut off by a stronger force. His hands shook as he tried again, changing frequencies, but nothing worked. Then he realized something chilling: the humans had jammed all signals. They knew exactly what they were hiding, and they would not let the truth escape so easily. A sound behind him made him freeze. He turned slowly and saw a figure standing in the shadows of the ridge. A human, tall and silent, watching him with unreadable eyes. The man said nothing, only lifted a finger to his lips, then pointed down at the valley as if to say, "See what you want, but do not speak." The scout could not tell if it was a warning or a threat. When he blinked, the man was gone, melted into the dark. Heart-pounding, the scout stumbled back toward the quarters, his mind racing with what he had seen. Back in the room, he told the others in a whisper. Their faces turned pale as he described the valley, the weapons, the soldiers. The leader listened in silence, then asked only one question. Did they see him? The young scout hesitated, then nodded slowly. The leader's heart sank. That meant the humans knew he had discovered the truth. The colony's silence, their watchful eyes, their cold greeting, it all made sense now. They were hiding an army. The next morning, the humans acted as if nothing had happened. They smiled politely, offered food, and guided the scouts around the settlement. But now, every detail looked different. The fences were not for animals, but for defense. The watchtowers had no guards in them, yet the scouts felt eyes on them from every corner. Even the friendly handshakes carried a weight that felt dangerous. The leader tried once more to send a coded signal from his wrist device, but it was still blocked. The humans controlled the airwaves completely. Later that day, the scouts were invited to a gathering hall. The walls were decorated with banners, showing strange symbols that did not match any galactic record. One scout leaned close and whispered that they looked like military insignias. During the meal, the humans spoke about harvests and survival, but their words felt hollow. Then something happened that froze the blood of every alien at the table. A child walked forward, carrying a long case. He opened it slowly, and inside lay the pieces of a weapon, clean and sharp. With calm hands, the boy began to assemble it piece by piece, never breaking eye contact with the visitors. The room grew silent. Scouts could hear only the clicks of metal fitting together. The child finished, placed the weapon on the table, and then walked away as if nothing had happened. The message was clear. The humans were not hiding anymore. They wanted the scouts to know. The leader forced a polite smile, his hand shaking under the table. He understood now they were being allowed to see only what the humans chose.
Oh.
And if the humans had decided to reveal this much, then something far worse was still hidden. That night, the scouts did not sleep. They whispered about escape, about running back to their ship before it was too late. But the leader shook his head. The humans were watching every move, and escape routes would already be guarded. He told them to wait, to watch, to survive. Yet deep inside, he feared that waiting was already too late. He could still see the valley in his mind, rows of soldiers marching in the shadows, weapons shining in the dark, and he could not shake. The thought that those soldiers were not preparing to defend themselves, they were preparing to strike. The scouts woke the next morning with heavy hearts and restless eyes. Every step they took in the settlement felt like walking inside a trap. The humans guided them politely, spoke in calm voices, and offered help. But behind every word, there was something hidden. It was as if the whole colony was acting on a script, rehearsed and planned. The leader of the scout team had traveled to many worlds, but never had he felt such pressure from silence alone. The humans were not shouting, not threatening, yet their stillness carried more weight than weapons. By midday, the humans announced that the colony's leader wished to meet them for a special gathering. They called it a dinner of peace. The scouts felt uneasy but had no choice. They were led to a hall built from heavy stone and reinforced metal beams. The building looked too strong for simple use. Inside, long tables were arranged, and humans filled the seats, their faces calm and watchful. At the far end sat the colony's leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet smile. She rose slowly, welcomed the scouts, and invited them to eat. The meal was rich with food grown on the colony's fields, but the visitors found no comfort in it. During the dinner, the leader spoke softly about survival, about how hard the colony had worked after being abandoned centuries ago, reminded them of storms, hunger, and endless winters, but her voice carried no sadness. Instead, there was steel in her words, a pride that came from enduring alone. The scouts nodded politely, though unease spread with every sentence. The woman's eyes seemed to pierce through them, as if she already knew their thoughts and their fears. Then, without warning, a child walked forward, carrying a small wooden box. The hall grew silent as he placed it on the table before the scouts. Slowly, the child opened the box and began to take out pieces of metal. The scouts exchanged nervous glances as they realized what it was. Piece by piece, the child assembled a weapon, his small hands steady, his eyes locked onto theirs the whole time. The clicking of metal against metal echoed through the hall. Louder than any voice, the boy did not speak, did not smile. He only finished the weapon, laid it across the table, and stepped back into the shadows. The leader of the scouts felt his throat dry. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. He knew exactly what the message meant. This was not about showing skill. This was a warning. The humans wanted the scouts to understand that even their children were soldiers, that the colony had not grown weak in isolation but had become something far more dangerous.
Oh, baby.
The alien crew lowered their eyes, trying not to show fear. But inside, they felt it burning. The colony leader raised her glass and said, "To survival." Her voice carried through the hall, and the humans echoed it in unison, "To survival." The sound filled the chamber like a chant, strong and unified. The scouts forced weak smiles, but the moment chilled them deeper than any winter storm. After the dinner, the scouts were escorted back to their quarters. The leader of the team whispered sharply to his crew as soon as the door shut. They were trapped. Every move they made was being watched, every word controlled. One scout argued that they should attempt escape during the night, but another shook his head. If children could build weapons so calmly, then soldiers would already be waiting outside. The leader pressed his hand to his communicator again, trying desperately to send a signal through the interference, but nothing went through. The humans had sealed them in silence. Hours passed, and then faint footsteps were heard outside their quarters. The scouts froze, waiting. A slip of paper slid under the door. The leader bent and picked it up. There were only 3 words written in human language. "We are ready." His heart sank. They were not only hiding preparations, they were announcing them. The colony wanted to be seen, wanted the truth to reach the galaxy. But if they controlled all signals, how would the scouts ever carry the warning? That night, the youngest scout could not sleep. He pressed his ear against the wall and heard distant sounds, the same rhythm of boots he had followed before. Now it was louder, bolder, as if the humans were no longer trying to hide it. He whispered to the others, and they gathered by the window. In the far distance, under the moonlight, they saw figures marching in lines, torches glowing in the dark. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They carried banners with strange insignias, symbols of unity that none of the aliens recognized. The leader of the scouts knew then that this was not just training. This was a declaration. The humans had chosen the moment to reveal themselves. The scouts had been allowed to see enough to understand, but never enough to act. Escape seemed impossible, yet staying felt even more dangerous. The leader pressed his hand against the cold window. Watching the silent army move under the night sky, for the first time in his long service, he felt truly powerless. He had faced pirates, wars, and plagues across the galaxy, but never had silence. Cut so deep. The humans had turned stillness into a weapon, and he could feel it pressing on his mind like a blade. He knew the council would not believe a word unless proof was delivered. But he also knew the humans had no intention of letting proof leave this world. As the torches in the valley flickered like fireflies of war, the leader whispered to himself, words his crew could not hear. "This is not a colony. This is a warning." His eyes did not leave the marching figures. The night was long, and in every shadow he saw the shape of what was coming. The next day began with a strange quiet. The scouts were escorted out of their quarters by human guards who spoke politely but firmly, leading them through the settlement without explaining where they were going. The leader of the scout team felt a cold weight in his chest. Every step felt like it was carrying them deeper into a plan that was not their own. He glanced at his crew, saw their uneasy faces, and knew they all felt the same thing. This was not a tour, it was a message. The humans walked them past the fields and workshops, past the quiet homes and the children playing with sticks that looked too much like rifles. The path twisted toward the mountains, where the ground sloped downward into a wide valley. At the edge stood a massive metal wall, smooth and seamless, with no visible entrance. It looked like part of the mountain itself, but too perfect, too. "Be natural." Scouts slowed, their legs heavy, while the humans continued forward without hesitation. Then, with a deep groan, the ground shook, and the wall split open. A massive door, thick as a fortress gate, began to slide apart, revealing darkness within. The scouts froze as a wave of cold air rushed out. Inside the mountain, dim lights flickered on, casting pale beams across a cavern so vast that the scouts could not see its end. And there, standing in the shadows, were ships. Not small shuttles or transports, but warships, huge vessels with armored hulls, bristling with weapon ports and reinforced plating. The aliens could not breathe. These were ships built not just to fly, but to fight. Hundreds of humans moved about inside, working on engines, carrying crates of ammunition, testing weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Sparks from welding torches lit the cavern like flashes of lightning. The scouts stared in horror. The colony had not just survived, it had built a fleet. The leader of the scouts took a slow step forward, his hands trembling. He had studied human engineering from centuries past, and he could see the difference. These ships were not replicas of old designs. They were modified, improved, hardened for war. Engines were larger, the armor thicker, the weapons sharper. Somehow, in 3 centuries of silence, cut off from the galaxy, the humans had advanced. Further in secret than most worlds had in plain sight, the scout's stomach twisted. This was not just survival, this was preparation. One of the human guides turned to the visitors and spoke in a calm voice. We endured storms, famine, and isolation. We learned to rely on no one but ourselves. We remembered the old wars. We remembered the betrayals. We built these so that no one could ever abandon us again. His words carried no anger yet. Every syllable struck like a blade. The scouts exchanged looks of fear. They understood the message clearly. This was not a fleet meant to defend a colony. This was a fleet meant to change the galaxy. The youngest scout tried once more to send a distress signal through his wrist device. But the screen remained dead, smothered by the jamming field. He clenched his jaw in frustration, fighting back. Panic. If the council could not be warned, then by the time anyone discovered the truth, it would already be too late. As the scouts stared at the ships, they overheard voices echoing from the humans working nearby. The words were not meant for them, but they carried clearly through the cavern. Once the council knows, it will be too late. When their fleets come, we will already be gone. Another voice answered, steady and firm. The stars will remember. Us. The galaxy will remember what it means to fear humanity. The scouts froze at those words. It was not just a colony speaking. It was a people ready to step out of the shadows with fire in their hands. The leader of the scout team wanted to shout, to demand answers, but his throat locked. He realized the humans were not hiding anymore. They were revealing just enough to terrify, to make sure the message sank into their visitors' minds. And in that moment, he understood something chilling. The scouts were not witnesses by accident. They were witnesses by design. The humans wanted them to see. The humans wanted the galaxy to know, but only on their terms. When the humans finally led the scouts out of the cavern, the door closed behind them with a thundering crash. The mountain looked whole again, silent and unbroken, as if it had never opened at all. The valley lay still, but the scouts' hearts raced with the memory of what they had seen. The leader could not shake the image of those ships. Waiting in the dark like predators ready to strike, that night, back in their quarters, the scouts argued in hushed voices. One said they had to escape immediately, steal a transport if they must. Another warned that every path would already be blocked. The youngest whispered that maybe the humans would let them go after all. They had been shown the ships. But the leader shook his head slowly. No, he said. They don't need us to escape. They need us to carry their warning. And they know that fear spreads faster than fire. The room fell silent. Outside, the colony slept in quiet order. But the scouts could still hear it, the faint echo of drills, of metal against metal, of boots striking ground. It was the heartbeat of an army rising beneath the ice. And as the leader closed his eyes, he whispered words he had never spoken. Before the council must know, but I fear we will not survive long enough to tell them. The morning came with a sky to clear, to calm, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. The scouts were brought to the landing field, their alien hearts racing with a mix of relief and dread. Their ship was still there, untouched, gleaming in the pale light. For a brief moment, they thought maybe the humans would let them leave. Maybe this nightmare would end with nothing more than a terrifying memory. But the silence of the humans walking beside them told another story. Their faces showed no hostility, no kindness. Only that same unreadable calm that had haunted the scouts since the first day. The leader of the scout team signaled quietly to his crew. If there was any chance to escape, it was now. The humans had allowed them to come this far, but that did not mean freedom. The crew hurried aboard, sealed the hatch, and powered up the engines. The controls lit up, and for the first time in days, the scouts felt a spark of hope. The ship rose smoothly from the ground, leaving the settlement shrinking below. One scout whispered that they had made it. Another whispered that it was too easy. The leader said nothing because deep inside he felt the same dread as the ship. Broke through the clouds, the scanners lit up with alarms. In front of them, the stars shimmered strangely. Then, one by one, massive shapes uncloaked. Human warships, larger than anything the scouts had seen before, slid into view. Their armored hulls glistened with scars of past testing, their weapons charged and ready. They had been waiting above the colony all along, hidden by technology. The Council had never known humans possessed. The scout ship froze in space, surrounded on all sides. The crew gasped, their fear rising like a tide. The leader gripped the controls, but every escape route was blocked. The human ships moved in. Perfect silence. No signals, no broadcasts. They did not need to speak. The message was already clear. Then, as if answering their unspoken questions, a transmission finally came through. The voice was calm, steady, and undeniably human. "You will go back," it said. "You will tell your council what you have seen. You will tell them that humanity does not ask for permission anymore." The scouts sat frozen, unable to respond. Their leader forced out a trembling question. "If you are strong enough to strike, why let us live? Why not destroy us now?" There was a pause, then the voice answered with chilling simplicity. "Because fear is stronger when it spreads on its own. You will carry it for us." The transmission ended, and the silence of space pressed on them heavier than any weapon. The scouts watched as the human fleet drifted aside, opening a narrow path through the stars. It was not mercy. It was control. The humans were showing them that every move was part of a plan. The scout ship accelerated slowly, too afraid to do anything else. As they passed the human warships, the crew could see rows of soldiers through transparent viewports, standing at attention watching them leave. Thousands of human eyes followed their small vessel until the fleet was behind them, swallowed by the void inside the scout ship. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, the youngest whispered what they all feared. "We were never meant to escape. We were meant to deliver the message." The leader did not deny it. His mind replayed the images again and again. The silent colony, the training children, the hidden fleet, and now this armada in the sky. It was not survival, it was vengeance, sharpened and patient. He felt a chill run down his spine. The galaxy had thought humans were forgotten. Instead, they had been preparing as the ship sped. Toward safe space, the scouts began piecing together what they had learned. Centuries of isolation had forced the humans to rely only on themselves. In their silence, they had built weapons more advanced than anything the Council had monitored. Worst of all, they had not built them in anger, they had built them with discipline, with patience, with a unity that most civilizations lacked. The leader realized the most terrifying truth. This was not the last human colony. If one world had built such power, others might have done the same. The crew tried one more time to send a signal, now that they were away from the jamming field. The device lit up, the first clear signal they had seen in days. Relief mixed with dread as the message burst into the open channels, carrying their warning toward the Council. Yet even as the transmission sent, the leader felt his stomach tighten. The humans had let them go. That meant the humans wanted the Council to know. This was not a secret slipping free. It was a threat delivered by design. When the message was complete, the scout ship went silent again. No one spoke. Each crew member sat, lost in thought, haunted by the same fear. They had not just witnessed a hidden army. They had walked into the center of a storm waiting to break. The leader stared into the dark of space and whispered the words he knew his crew was too afraid to say aloud. "Is coming," far behind them. In the quiet orbit of the lost colony, the human fleet remained in perfect formation. They did not chase. They did not speak. They only waited, their engines dark and their weapons ready, watching, waiting, preparing. The council chamber was never truly silent. Even in moments of tension, hundreds of voices usually rose together, debating, arguing, demanding. But when the scout ship finally docked and its crew delivered their report, silence spread like a wave. Every ambassador, every general, every leader sat frozen in their seats, the words hanging heavy in the air. A lost human colony, not weak, not broken, but armed, trained, and ready for war. A fleet hidden in the shadows of a mountain. Larger fleet waiting in orbit, decloaked only long enough to deliver a warning. Humanity, long thought abandoned, was not asking for help. They were declaring their independence in the most terrifying way possible. The scout leader stood in the center of the chamber, his voice low but steady. He described the cold greeting, the silent children assembling weapons, the hidden valley of training soldiers, the cavern of warships, and finally, the armada that had surrounded their ship. Every word struck the chamber like thunder. When he repeated the human message, humanity does not ask for permission. Any more the silence deepened until even the walls seemed to listen. At last the chamber exploded in noise. Some shouted that the humans must be crushed before they grew too powerful. Others cried that war with them would destroy countless worlds. A few whispered that negotiations were still possible, that perhaps the humans only wanted recognition. But the scout leader shook his head. He had seen their eyes. He had heard the chants. The humans did not want recognition. They wanted respect, and they were willing to take it by force. As the council argued, new reports began to arrive. Fragments of intercepted transmissions, unexplained fleet movements, sightings on the edges of space. And then the truth struck. Like a hammer, the lost colony was not alone. Across the galaxy, other human settlements that had been cut off centuries ago were stirring. Fleets were rising from forgotten worlds. Armies were drilling in secret valleys. The silence of centuries had been broken, not by accident, but by design. The humans had been waiting for the right moment to return. Panic spread through the chamber. Generals demanded fleets be mobilized at once. Diplomats begged for restraint. Merchants warned that war with humans would burn trade routes across the stars. The council could not decide, but the fear was already spreading. Fear, the scouts remembered, was exactly what the humans wanted. Meanwhile, far from the council, the humans were already moving. The colony that had revealed itself was only the first spark. The fleet hidden beneath the mountain began to rise into orbit. Engines flared, weapons armed, and warships vanished into hyperspace, scattering in all directions. Each ship carried soldiers with the same cold discipline, children who had grown into warriors under the shadow of abandonment. Leaders who had sworn never to be forgotten again. Their mission was not survival anymore. It was conquest. The scout leader sat alone in his quarters that night, unable to rest. His crew had survived, but he felt no victory. He replayed the words he had overheard in the cavern. When they return to their council, we will already be gone. The stars will remember us. He understood now what they had meant. By the time the council finished arguing, the humans would already be striking. They had forced the galaxy to waste time in fear and debate, while their fleets moved like shadows. Through the stars in the darkness of his chamber, the leader whispered to himself, "We thought they were lost. But it was us who lost sight of what they truly were." He could still see the child at the dinner table, calmly assembling a weapon, eyes unblinking, as if the act was as natural as breathing. That memory haunted him most. Told him that humanity had passed its resolve to every generation, that the fire of vengeance burned even in the youngest hearts. No other species in the galaxy could match that. Soon after the first reports of human attacks arrived, a frontier outpost gone silent, a patrol fleet destroyed, a mining station seized without warning. Each report carried the same chilling pattern. The humans struck fast, precise, and without hesitation. And each time they left survivors just enough to spread the story. The council began to see the pattern. The humans were not only fighting with ships and soldiers, they were fighting with fear itself. The chamber filled with arguments once. More, but the scout leader no longer cared. He knew the truth. War had already begun. It had begun the moment the humans chose to reveal themselves. He thought of the last words he had spoken to his crew before leaving the colony, the galaxy. Has no idea what is coming. Now, he realized, the galaxy was beginning to understand. On the edge of known space, the human fleets gathered, world by world, colony by colony. Signals passed between them, not in pleas for help, but in calls to arms. The silence of centuries was over. The stars trembled as a new voice rose, not asking, not begging, but declaring. Humanity had returned, and in every corner of the galaxy, fear spread faster than light, because first contact had not turned warm. Cold, it had turned deadly.